So on July 30th, 2021, I sent a message to a group of my friends asking them if they would be interested. Hypothetically, if I were to do a D&D podcast, would they like to join? After a resounding yes from everyone I asked, on September 12th, 2021, we had a test session where we played together to figure out if we would be a good group. And on October 24th of 2021, we recorded our first official session for the first episode of Fireside Dice. And that first episode officially went live on January 28th of 2022. Hello everyone and welcome to this special Emberside chat anniversary edition. We've been working on Fireside Dice for over a year now, which is mind-boggling to me. That's so cool. I am joined by, of course, Jens, Josh, Riley, and Emma. And today we want to sit down and talk about where our podcast started, where we are currently, and where we see this show going in the future. So, how's everyone doing?
I've given my response. You know where I'm at.
Yeah, but the people haven't heard your response.
The
listeners.
Very excited. I'm very excited to be here. I'm so glad that we've had a year of this, and I hope that there's a lot more ahead.
It seems crazy to think that we've been going for a full year.
It is kind of crazy. Going back to where it all began, like, I knew Skylar because we lived in the same town, and then he moved, I moved, and life happened, and he reached out of the blue and was like, hey, you want in on this? And I love Dungeons & Dragons. I love the community of it, and you know what? I said yeah.
Obviously. Totally didn't tie him up and throw him in a closet with a mic and say, DM! It's totally not what happened.
That's never what happened.
We'll get to that point. Because we need to talk about the test session first.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like Jen said, since I was the one who approached everyone, because I knew everyone before this show, but no one else knew each other. Jen's already told us how he knew me. Josh, why don't you let the people know how you and I met?
Oh, Skylar and I met when we were both serving as LDS missionaries in Alabama. We stayed connected after that, and I think when you reached out to me, I was living in Arizona at the time.
I think so.
Married.
We moved
my
pretty
wife,
early on into the production.
Yeah, my wife was, I think at that point, she was about 5 months pregnant, and we were moving across country to Alabama. We did that, and then I think within probably about 2 or 3 weeks of us getting here, maybe not even that long, maybe it was only a week of us getting here, we were recording our first session. We've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. And then Riley.
Alright. I met Skylar at college. I actually lived one town over from where he grew up, but never knew each other till we went to the same college. And he gave me my first taste of D&D at an event the college had called Lantrosity, where he had a bunch of pre-built characters and he put us up against a really OP venomous dragon.
I remember that.
That was lots of fun.
Yeah.
And then we've only hung out a couple of times, like playing Smash Bros. Since then, but
yeah.
Yeah. Then you asked me to do D&D. Asked if I wanted to do D&D with a bunch of people I don't know. I'm like, yeah.
Of course. All right.
But
And
I'd
Emma.
like to add real quick.
Yeah.
That Skylar came down. I think, were you guys living in Utah at the time?
Yeah, we were living in North Utah.
But you came all the way down to my wedding reception too.
That was
in
fun.
Arizona.
That was a fun trip. All right, Emma, how do I know you? Who are you?
A stranger, basically. No,
yeah.
Kidding.
No.
Basically. No, so Skylar and I are cousins. We more or less grew up together. We didn't see each other a ton, but it was often enough, you know? I could be remembering this wrong, but I feel like the very first time we both played D&D, it was together after you got your very first, like, D&D box set. I think we talked about this in one of the other Emberside chats. It was 4E, I believe. We had gone to Hastings, and you got it for your birthday.
Yep.
It
So,
was.
hold on. What's the oldest edition that everyone here has played?
4th edition.
4th edition?
One session of 4th edition.
Okay. And the other two
I
of you?
played I played 3, but only a few games.
I've only played 5th edition.
So, oh boy.
What have you played?
So I played 3.5 Pathfinder, which is basically 3.75.
Yeah, I've played
I
that one
didn't
too.
ever get into 4th. I've also done the classic, like, 2000s, early 2000s, late 90s Star Wars RPG, which is very similar to 3.5 and 3.0. I have a little bit of experience.
Just a little bit.
Not a whole lot. Just a little bit.
We
And
played
I
a lot
literally-
of games on P days and stuff. A bunch of homebrew 5e stuff. That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. All right, so that's how everyone knew me. I cherry picked every single person on this show because I had played D&D with all of them at some point. And I had a very specific vision for this show. I wanted it to be very story driven. I wanted us to take it seriously but still have fun. And so there were specific qualifications for who I wanted to join in, and everyone here checked the box on my qualifications. And so here we are
There's
today.
a part of me that's very surprised by that for me, and at the same time, I totally get why for me. Because, so Skylar and I, we played. So we lived in the same town for a little bit, and we ended up actually. This campaign is pretty similar. We're doing a reflavored Curse of Strahd, and I did a very similar idea with him previous to this. It's kind of the same game, and in a lot of ways, it's not the
Very
same.
different. That game was
we've
also a Magic the Gathering Planeswalker campaign, but it was
In
like
fact,
all
we
on
actually
Innistrad.
met his character. We've met his character from that game as an NPC in this one, and he's even
Yeah.
played as it again.
Yeah, Erasmus Kane
Erasmus.
that I played in the Suri Sideshow episodes was the character I played in that game. Only at that time I was playing him as a ranger because I thought the idea of a vampire ranger whose favored enemy was humans was really fun. But
Oh, that's super cool.
yeah.
That is fun.
Yep.
That campaign ended very abruptly, and that final boss area where we had the patron of our warlock, who I had a homebrewed Eldrazi Titan that was stuck in the Moon Silver Temple.
Yeah, I missed out on that boss fight because I got married and left the country for a couple months. As you do, yeah.
Yep.
That makes it sound like you were fleeing from a terrible crime.
I
Was
don't
he
know
was
what you're
leaving
talking
me?
about. So when I initially approached the group, I was planning on being the dungeon master because I knew Jens suffers from the forever DM syndrome. Like, you're always DMing. You don't get to play very often. So I was like, this would be a great opportunity for him to play. I'm going to run this game. And we did a test session where I ran the game for Josh, Riley, and Jens. It went great. I did a test editing, but then I very quickly realized with how much time it took to edit the show, I was not going to have this enough time to prepare sessions and to actually dungeon master the show. And so I asked Jens if he'd be okay with DMing, and of course he said yes, because he's just awesome that way. And when I initially asked you if you wanted to do this project, you were automatically assuming you were going to DM at the beginning. I was like, no, I got this. And then I was like, I don't got this. And
It takes so much.
Mhm.
It really does.
Especially because I was going to do a homebrew setting. And so there was going to be a lot of work going into preparing it.
And so, yeah, when we switched over to me DMing, I was like, okay, I presented a few different options, and we basically rebuilt the campaign from the ground up. And I gave the three of you some options. I was like, okay, we can continue in this setting, and I can completely twist it from what Skylar originally wanted. We can do a couple of different settings that I've gone and made. We could do this pre-established setting and a couple of other options. And I put out the D&D in Magic the Gathering as one of those ideas. And I initially wasn't thinking that we were going to do that. I initially was like, okay, I'm going to need to completely rehaul one of these old worlds that I made like 5 or 6 years ago for other editions and rebuild it for 5e. And as we started narrowing down, we were like, okay, we want to do an established storyline so that there's some reference material for people to go off of. And I think the decision came in at one point that we want to do some sort of like pre-established setting, but we don't want to do one that's got like a published book or is an established setting for other campaigns, because we don't want to mess with that sort of continuity. We want to be our own thing. And so at some point I was like, hey, what if we did this MTG campaign? It has very expansive story, stuff that people can go and look up. It's got a fan base. It's got all of these things that I think would be bonuses, and we could just kind of, do our own thing with it.
Yeah. And I was remembering that game that you and I played together. I was like, oh, I missed that. That was really fun. Let's do it. And when Josh and I were on our missions, one of the things we would do on our days off was play Magic the Gathering. We got really into that, and probably a little too into that at times.
Probably.
And so, yeah, it's a fun setting. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of cool stories that you can tell.
You can also just go and completely mess with me like we have.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier, especially since you're letting us play Planeswalkers to screw things over. Because we can just dip whenever we want, as long as we've slept. It's fine. Before we get too far away from the test session, I want to talk about why each of us who are playing as players chose the character we did. And for Josh and Riley, your characters that you're playing are very tied to that test session that we did. So why don't you two start us off with why you chose the character you did?
I guess I can go first. The Bafuur, yeah, I did create him to a degree for the test session, but I kind of fell into a backstory hole where I just started brainstorming backstory stuff for what this guy's backstory could be just for the test session, and it just kind of spiraled, and I ended up writing out this whole tragic backstory and throwing in a lot of interesting character flavor elements, and I just decided that I
Pocket
would go
bacon
ahead and,
flavor.
yeah, pocket bacon flavor. I just decided I'd go ahead and play him. I'd actually not never, but I very rarely played fighters, and have never played a cleric. So now playing a fighter multi-class cleric is kind of fun for me, because I had previously kind of gotten stuck in the ranger, barbarian classes, and just kind of been circling with those two for a long time. And I kind of wanted to try something else out. So this has been really fun to really play two classes that I'm not super familiar with as far as playing them, but also adding backstory elements and things like that. It's been fun.
Riley, where did Suri come from? Why did you choose to play her?
Well, I didn't create her specifically for the test session. I always wanted to play a warlock, because ever since I read what all the classes can do, warlock has always stood out to me as the coolest spellcaster. Just because they're so versatile, and basically any class can become a warlock whenever they want. But I've never played a serious character really. And Suri's probably the most serious character I've played. I'm used to playing chaotic comedy characters, She's just I don't know how to explain it. She's the first spellcaster I've been able to play too. So
Emma, you're our newest one. What made you choose your character? And then we'll get back to Skylar.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. So, Leven, she is a merfolk monk. I adapted her from an NPC I used when I was DMing my own game. I had
fun.
I had my players. They were in my version of basically the Feywild, doing some courtly stuff. And I had this naiad character that basically was a merfolk. I was like, but I want her swamp. I like to bring in a sense of realism. So my mermaid is more like a mer-amphibian in my mind almost. Anyways, getting off track. Yeah, so she's adapted from that, and I'd never played a monk before, and I really wanted to try, so that's where she came from. She's a very different character now than what she was in that in my campaign, in my old campaign, but in other ways she's very similar as well. It's been fun seeing what she's ended up as versus where she started.
And I think at the point that this Emberside chat is going to get released, I'm not sure if the episode where Leven joins the main crew has released yet. I'm pretty sure it's soon if it hasn't come out yet.
Mm-hmm.
But we have seen her in the Bonded in Battle one-shot. And
True.
little
Just
fun
know that she's
tidbit.
getting pulled over.
Yeah, she is pulled over. Leven is going to be the primary character that you see Emma play. That Battle Bond one-shot that we did was actually the test session to see if Emma would fit into the group. And as soon as we were done with
immediately.
it, all of us were like, yep, this works, let's go with it. And we immediately recorded the first session, like main story session with her. Fun little extra tidbit. I think it's so funny that all of us are playing classes we've never played before. Because I had never played Bard before this campaign either.
Oh, that's sad.
That is fun.
That's a fun class.
I know. I've realized.
I've played DM before.
That's true. You have played DM before. Bard, it is a really fun class, and for a long time I was personally turned off from the class because of the memes of the class. The
memes.
Horny Bard that is. We won't get into what the memes are about the Bard class, but
we know.
If you want to know,
Yeah.
look it up, or
don't.
preferably don't look it up.
Maybe not.
You'll end up in places that you never wanted to go.
But
Just know that it's a thing.
Simultaneously, those memes are the exact reason why I created Bartholomew in the first place. Because I was like, you know what? I want to play a bard that contradicts every stereotypical meme about the class that has ever been. And so I distinctly made him older. I didn't make him a young man. I made him a family person. He's already got a family. He's very dedicated to his family. He's very kind, but like isn't out to get anything from anyone. He actively tries not to manipulate people. And I specifically decided to not go with a musician because I loved the idea of a storyteller still fitting the themes of a bard. And so Bartholomew was born from all that contradiction of the norm that I wanted to do with him. And coincidentally, I ended up just making my D&D self-insert by creating this character. He is basically just me. I'm playing myself in this campaign, which is a blessing and a curse, which we'll get into a little bit later. But
I think we talked about that a little bit last time we were recording too, is that how our characters are just little horcruxes of our souls, you know, just little pieces that we've siphoned off and just slightly altered mirror images.
yeah, there's a piece of ourselves in every character we play.
Oh yeah.
Real quick, before we move into the where we are now category, since we're playing a Magic the Gathering themed campaign, we made the decision early on to forego the traditional D&D alignment chart, and we chose to go with the MTG color theory as a replacement. So just real quick, everyone, what would you say your character's color combination is, and why do you think that?
I'm
gonna go
colorless
first.
because I'm everywhere.
Yes. I'm going to go first real fast and shamefully admit I keep forgetting to study the color chart. However, based on what I've heard you all say, I know that Leven has black in her mix. I know that for sure. Beyond
I
that,
would almost think Sultai for her color combo in terms of what it is. So blue, green, and black. Black being her core color. Green is a little bit of like the community flavor, which goes into her backstory. And blue, because Leven is very level-headed. She really tries to think things out.
Yeah, I was going to say, she's seemed black-blue to me in the episodes that we've recorded.
I'll take that. Thank you.
Which is
so
actually...
Leven is a...
It fits in well because based on what I know of the colors everyone else chose, that's a color combination that was unique. And so she definitely brings a very unique philosophical view to every situation that the party ends up in now.
There you go. Black, blue, a little bit of green.
So, going back to the blue and green, Skylar, I think you should go next.
Okay. Bartholomew, I did a lot of research to figure out what colors I wanted to play because I had an idea in my head of how Bartholomew would behave already, and for me it was a matter of finding the colors that fit. I would say Bartholomew is primarily blue, white, green. Although in recent episodes we've recorded, that blue's been shifting into red a little bit in certain moments. But yeah, I think white is his core color because he is very interested in the well-being of the collective over the well-being of himself. He's very focused on helping other people. The blue, like Leven, he's very logical most of the time about the way he approaches situations, and green, he has a very distinct sense of community, and family is very important to him. And so while he tries to take care of everyone, he also welcomes everyone into his family. Everyone is his children, and he will take care of everyone.
Most recently recorded episode really brought out that green, and I so love it. You guys, I'm sorry, audience, you're not going to hear it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Just know
So
that
good.
it's coming, and know that it is going to wreck you like it wrecked us.
Yep.
They are
So
referring to
good.
episode 17. I'm not sure which episode is going to be releasing around the time this Emberside chat goes out, but episode 17 is the one we're talking about, so you can look forward to that.
So now that we've gotten to know your characters a little bit,
Wait.
whoa.
Josh and
Josh
Riley
and
still need
Riley
to
haven't
answer.
answered.
sorry.
Slow your roll.
I have no chill.
Pump the brakes. Pull on the reins. Continue.
I guess I'll go first, or third, or wherever we are in this.
Wherever we're at in the pecking order, I don't know.
Yes, Riley is now going.
Suri, she's definitely, she's got like her sense of self well-being well kept, so she's definitely black oriented a little bit, and she's also very emotionally driven, so she has a lot of red in her as well. But I feel like judging from last session, I feel like we will see a lot more colors probably come out of her, seeing how things are going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Suri's interesting compared to Bartholomew and Leven, because Bart and Leven, they both have a core color. Like, this is their primary color, and then these are secondary. For Suri, I feel like black, red are equally core colors for her, because it really depends on how involved her patron is at the moment. If it's just Suri, she's very red. If the patron shows up, then black takes over.
Yeah,
Very
and
interesting.
That's the part that makes her like such a conflicting character, like to play, and it's been really fun to roleplay that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I love the way that Suri presents the red-black combination, because so often, from what I have seen in terms of like Magic the Gathering in that community, red-black is very much viewed as a Joker sort of villain.
Yeah, like super aggressive.
Super chaotic,
Crazy.
destructive. And to see a different side of that color combo, I think is super fascinating.
All right, Josh, what colors are Bafuur?
So, I think Bafuur is a combination of green, white, and red. There's definitely some emotionally charged moments for Bafuur early on in the podcast, and I think Innistrad kind of increases that red, maybe even a touch of black, and Bafuur trying to like not focusing as much on the group, maybe a little bit more on himself. But at the same time, I think with some of Balfour's backstory and then the newfound cleric abilities, green is definitely starting to show through a little bit stronger than it has, kind of counteracting Innistrad's poison and focusing Bafuur on the group. And Balfour's thoughts never really leave his family, although we haven't really had a chance to meet them or to learn about them yet. Bafuur is definitely focused on them. Are there any other colors or things that you guys have seen from Bafuur?
I think that red, green, white really sums Bafuur up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
I would agree.
Initially, he was very much red-white.
Yeah, those two colors came out very strongly on Ravnica.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think the green really started to show its hand from the first Planeswalk and on. When that spark kind of initiated that first, what was it, Spare the Dying
Mhm.
Yeah,
that he
Yeah.
used.
right after that initial encounter with the Abyssinian priest.
Yep.
And
I think that first moment was kind of that spark for him.
Mhm. There was a moment in, not a released episode yet, but an episode where we got in a fight as a party. The bad guy left, and Bart was about to make a very hasty decision, which is where some of the red started to show up. And Bafuur was just like, I'll go where you go. And I feel like that moment was a very red-green moment, because he was extremely loyal to Bart in that moment. And that passion of red combined with that community from green, it's fun. Bafuur, I think, of all the characters, has shown the most diverse combinations of colors over time. Like, he hasn't stayed, like, he has those three main ones, but which ones are interacting with each other the most changes throughout the story, which is really fun to see in his character.
And I love that it shows the dynamic nature, like people change over time. And so their color identity also changes over time.
It's been fun. I love these characters so much. And in a little bit, we'll get into where we see the characters going and stuff like that. But to move on to the next category, we want to talk about where the show is currently. After a year of producing and recording this show, what are we looking at? And to start us off, I want to share some of the really fun statistics for how many views / listens and downloads we've had on podcast platforms, which were available on Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast. We have had 354 views over the course of the year that we've been out. And about over 50% of that has been in the last 3 months, which is really interesting.
That's awesome.
So the show is definitely growing. And then we're also available on YouTube. And so we have had 656 views on YouTube since the show started releasing. Of course, we've already talked about Emma has joined the show. She wasn't there for a good long while. I want to say it's episode...
I want to say it's like 10 or 12, somewhere in there.
It's not 10, because that's the one I'm editing currently. I think it might actually be closer to 13 or 14. Yeah. That she shows up for the first time. So soon, but not quite yet. But like we said, she did show up in the Bonded in Battle one-shot that we did, which was a really fun one-shot. And we'll talk about the one-shots a little bit later as well. Going back to our conversations about the characters, what has all of your favorite, like if you could all choose one character moment, whether it's for your character or someone else's, what has been your favorite character moment in the episodes that we've released? Try to keep it to between episodes 1 and 10. Or 1 and 3. Before Emma's character shows up. This is the problem with being so far ahead on recordings. I don't know.
In terms of like an early character moment that I absolutely loved, I think it was in the first, maybe the second episode. After the group gets together, they go to Bart's house, and they're like, okay, we've got to research where Krenko is. We've got to find our target. We've got to figure out what's going on. We've got all of this sort of information. And he had everyone roll an investigation check. And based off of the results of those investigation checks, we had some really interesting character interaction come out of that, because Bafuur rolled really, really low, and he fell asleep like instantly. And Suri held on a lot longer. We got to see Bart play that father figure for them for the first time. The following morning, having the bacon happen, and it's become a thing at this point. The bacon is a thing.
Oh man, the bacon.
It's canon.
Having that first night of the characters together and seeing we have two very recently planeswalked for the first time characters, and we have this older figure who's going to end up being a mentor to these guys, and we hope that he doesn't die, but everything is shaping up to be that climactic moment where Bart dies. It's going to be the Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope.
Just to clarify, we're not trying to kill Bart. So
We're
if you
not
like
trying.
Bart,
They
if he's
are.
your favorite character, we're not trying to kill him. We
I
just feel
think
like
they
it'll
are.
be a natural fit if he does die.
No.
But yeah,
But that for me, I love those character moments that we had in that first
that
little
was
bit.
really fun. Riley, what would you say has been your favorite character moment?
It's hard keeping it within that episode limitation. But
Because we've had some good ones in recent recordings.
Yeah, the recent recordings have been phenomenal.
But yeah, when we were all down in Bart's basement looking around, and Bart showed Suri or he didn't show it to her, but she found it, and then he let her keep it, and because he knew it brought her comfort, was a really good moment. And also the way Suri just interacts with all of the Bitterheart witches and Annabelle, like I love that so much.
Yeah, Suri with the Bitter Hearts is really fun, especially Annabelle. Josh, what's your favorite character moment, Ben?
I think with Bafuur, now is that first planeswalk to Innistrad within that episode?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've
That's like
gotten
what?
to Innistrad. They're just about to come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think so far in that episode, Constraint, my favorite thing has been watch Bafuur discover the magic. I think that's been the most fun for me to play because I've never played a spellcaster who didn't know they had the ability to spellcast.
Well, and
And
every
so-
time that he does it, it is so fun because for me as the DM, I get to try and reason out how is it that this thing happens without him consciously doing it. That spare the dying moment was so much fun for me on my end, and I hope that it was fun for you as well.
It's made me think more about the growth of Bafuur and what direction I want to take him, because it makes me think about, okay, what are the moments where he's going to be using these spells to what he's doing in the story, and so trying to develop him to be in those situations and things like that's been interesting.
Yeah, watching you play Bafuur that way has changed how I approach Bart and his spells, because the way I figured he came into his power was very similar, where it wasn't something he consciously learned, it just sort of started happening. Like, he started telling his kids a bedtime story one night, and dancing lights happened. And that was where the origin of his power came from. And so I've been trying to think
I can
of...
totally see that. Oh my goodness.
I've been trying
No,
to...
you cannot give me that sort of image and not just expound on that. You've got to share that story right now. Come on.
Okay. So, Bartholomew, a little bit of information. He got married, and he had 2 kids. A daughter that was his oldest, and a son. And when his daughter was really young, I think his son was like a newborn at the time, so it was just his daughter. He was sitting down at night telling her a bedtime story. And as he was telling her this story, these little like pinpricks of light started to form, like floating around them. And the little globules of light would take the shape of like a unicorn or whatever he was telling the story of at the time. They would appear and start like dancing around. Similar to when Bartholomew teaches Bafuur and Suri how to planeswalk, he does the same thing then, where he shapes the light. And that's why I played it that way, is because I had already come up with this backstory of that's how he figured out his powers, was using his words, he can make things happen. And it all started with dancing lights.
Love that. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
That's
I
amazing.
love Bart so much. He's such a
That's
fun
so
character.
cute.
As far as my favorite character moment in the released episodes, I think by the time this goes out, we will have I'll have released the episode where we go to trial and Vincenzo has helped us out. I think that's the last episode that got released. So I think it's actually the next episode after this that Leven shows up with the main crew.
Yep.
I think my
Well,
favorite...
you share a character moment too.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have you share a character moment. He's had a lot of really fun moments. I think I'll have to like shadow everyone else. And that moment with Suri and Bafuur in his study where he went and grabbed blankets for Bafuur so he'd be comfortable, and like just that whole experience of having these people in his home where he started to recognize that Suri was probably from Innistrad, and he gave her that book and had that very touching moment with her. He made sure Bafuur was as comfortable as possible. And then next morning in his apron, he's cooking breakfast for everyone. That, I feel like I really started to pick up on his character at that point and how I was going to play him moving forward. And that father figure role that he fills has become my favorite part of him, because my daughter, my first child, was born about a week after we recorded our first session. And so I have been experiencing fatherhood for the first time in my life at the same time that I've been playing this character who was a father for like 20 years. And so it's been really fun to take these emotions that I am feeling for my real life daughter and apply them into the decisions that Bartholomew makes and the way he views people around him. It's been really fun. Emma.
I mean, interchangeable, basically.
Basically.
No,
I'm going to give you permission to reference unreleased episodes because most of your character stuff has been in the unreleased stuff. Just
And if you
be
want to
careful
go
with
back to the
spoilers.
Bandit in Battle one-shot, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah.
no,
Just- you
that
have more
one-
freedom.
Okay, that episode was good. I hadn't quite found who Leven was then.
Mhm.
It wasn't until later episodes that I really tapped into her core. There have been some good moments with other characters with Leven. I think
she's had a moment with everyone except Suri so far.
Well,
I would say she's even had a brief moment with Suri. It may not have been positive. With Bart. Whew. And then with Bafuur, of course. My favorite moment with Bafuur and Leven is that very first episode that she shows up. And they're like bantering in Bart's home. It was A+ moments right there.
I love
Where they're
the
going back
staring
and
contest.
forth. Yeah.
I-
That was
yeah.
so good. I would say, yeah, those are my three, I think, defining character moments with Leven and the other characters so far.
I'll cut out the Bart and Suri parts, but I'll keep
Yeah.
the Bafuur one.
We can just say there are great characters or character moments with Leven and Suri and Bart. Just can't talk about them yet.
Mm-hmm.
Or else,
Yep.
because spoilers.
Yeah, we want to save you guys. We want that to be raw. We want that to be right there for you. So we don't want to spoil that with this. Like, that's not what we're here for.
All right. So moving on from our characters and the story of Fireside Dice, I want to take some time to talk about the logistics and the post-production side of this podcast and the things that we have learned about creating a show for people with the content that we're playing. I'll go first because I'm pretty sure I've learned the most since I'm the one who's in charge of
Probably.
the post-production stuff. I have learned to take test recordings before every session very seriously. I have learned that we pause a lot when we're talking, when we're recording, and I've learned how annoying editing audio can be. It has taken me all this entire year to start figuring out different things I can do in my editing software to fix some of the audio issues that our show had at the beginning. Those are some of the big ones. Also, fun fact, if you want to start a D&D podcast, just be aware that however long your raw audio segment is, double that, and that's how long you'll have to edit it. Sometimes triple. It depends on the episode and how much finagling you have to do, but I was not prepared for just how much time it was going to take to edit it, especially as time has gone on and I've gotten more and more picky about what things I'm leaving in. The shows have been shrinking because I've been getting pickier. I've been cutting more out. And when I first started, I was like, oh, it's going to be simple. I'm just going to listen through, cut out the dead space, and call it good. That is not all it... And even if that was all that it is, just cutting out the dead space and making sure those cuts are even adds so much time to the editing process.
Well, and I think that for me, the interesting piece of those stories getting shorter, the recording, so we record for X amount of time. The thing that I've learned as the one who's generating the content, who's doing the front-loading half of it, is I need to have enough planned for X number of time, because when you edit it down, it's going to go down by at least half most of the time.
Yeah, when I first started editing, I would usually cut out about 10 to 15 minutes. In these most recent episodes, at this point that I've been editing, I'm cutting 15 to 30 minutes out. And so our hour and a half long recording, raw audio, is getting shrunk down to 45 minutes to an hour, which isn't bad. Right. It's as long as the episodes are consistently producing, like moving the story forward, I'm not mad. But that's been an interesting thing to figure out through this process.
And here's another thing that with the post-production, I've done a little bit of it myself. You also have to make sure you don't shorten dead spaces too much. And you
Yep.
have the talking, and then you have the talking back to back, because that's confusing to listen to.
Yeah.
Because I've had that struggle as well. So it's incredibly time intensive.
Yeah.
So time intensive. I respect you a lot for doing it, especially with all that you have going on.
Yeah, I've learned that the inflection in someone's voice when a pause is involved in their statement changes how long that pause naturally should be. Because I love you, Jens. This is not a critique, but your DMing style, it includes a lot of pauses where you pause to put your thoughts together so that when you speak, it is something very clean. And those, I've learned that depending on the inflection of your voice in those moments, and this happens to all of us throughout the shows, but depending on the inflection, some of those I can shorten down to like barely nothing, so it just feels like a continued sentence. And some of them I have to have a longer gap to make that inflection make sense, which is another thing I didn't even think about when I started this process.
And I'm sorry for that, and it's just my style.
You're fine. I don't mind at all.
It's intentional. I think it's a hallmark of a good DM is you're taking the time to think it through.
And that's one of the differences between the Jen's run sessions and the one-shots that I've run. I've been able to look at those differences in DMing style, and I don't pause as often as I should. There are a lot of moments in those one-shots that I'm editing that I stutter over myself, and I repeat myself. I say way too often. But you don't have that as much, Jens, because you take the time to pause and put your words together before you speak them.
I have the same problem. I naturally will stutter and repeat myself. It's a very popular word of mine, so I get it.
Yeah.
We're just going in for the mantra.
We're all multi-classing into monks in real life.
I think that, yeah, I think that we're thinking the same thing, but our audio quality, that boost, that really happened after we had that mic sponsorship. And thank you, RC's Big Air, for helping boost our quality with your high quality videos. You helped us get a better quality with our mics.
It has changed so much, and we're still figuring out, like, tweaking the mics because we're all getting used to them. But yeah, that mic sponsorship, that has changed things. And the number one thing that I have been told is a turnoff for our show is the audio quality at the beginning. And unfortunately, especially that first episode, it was really bad. It wasn't really bad. It was better than some fresh startup shit podcasts. But there were things about it that, listening back on it now, I'm like, ooh, that bugs me. Ooh. And
there's some great character moments in there, but it is very much the quality of the audio really kind of ruins it, and I feel that too.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
How possible would it be to go back, or possible or feasible, would it be to go back and almost make it a prologue or like a story, re-record it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's actually something I was going to bring up. I was thinking that once we have released all of the episodes pre-mic sponsorship, I want to do a recap episode where it is just a complete prologue dump of this is what happened between episodes 1 and 13. This is everything you need to know so that you can pick up in this episode where the quality improves and move from there. So that we have that clear starting point that people who are new to the show, we can be like, start here and move forward from there. I think that will really help. If we can get people to start where our audio is at its best, I think that will really help the growth of our show. Because I genuinely believe that the early episode audio quality is one of the things holding our show back at the moment.
Oh, I would agree.
Because no one's going to start a D&D podcast on episode 14. They're going to start at 1, because there's a lot of character stuff, there's a lot of backstory, there are things that have happened that you need to know to understand the story moving forward. And so I definitely want to do some sort of recap episode like that.
Yeah.
I was thinking it could be really fun if I want to put together a script where I break down every episode, and I think it would be fun if we all work together and like start out with like Jens gives the recap part of the script for episode 1, and then another player does it for episode 2, and we just alternate through recapping each episode. I think that could be really fun.
Another idea maybe is doing it almost like a radio show, where it's almost like
that was my thought.
Subtly DMing through the way, and you guys have your character moments that you bring in your voice as your character.
That could be fun. I'll have to work on a script for that. And
Oh, like
see what we could
storytelling,
figure out.
yeah.
That could be really fun. I do like that idea. Some more listener feedback, since we're on the topic of that I've received. The one-shots that I ran, they were always intended to be just like little things to fill the space, but I've been told, and it's been brought to my attention, that they were really fun, specifically because we get to see new characters. We get to see the different ways that each of us players play a different character from our normal one. And I've been specifically told it's really fun to see Jens as a player.
Yeah.
And me as
Yeah.
the DM.
Yeah.
Which I was not expecting that the one-shots would be as well received as they have been. But honestly, out of all the episodes that we've released at the recording time we've recorded this Emberside chat, the specifically Waves of Madness Part 1, but all of the one-shots did better in their first week than any other episode we've released. And I have no idea why. I'm not sure why. It might be because they are very clearly separated from the main story, so they're easier to pick up. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think moving forward, we're going to have more of those one-shot characters. Those guys are going to show up some more. They're still definitely not going to be the main story. They'll be few and far between, but we will be seeing those 4 again, because I love that group. They're so fun.
Yeah, that's a fun little... I love getting to play as a character, and I love being able to interact with everyone on the like a level playing field rather than being that camera eye in the sky.
And it's interesting because you, Jens, and you Zoltan, are very, very different. And I think that's part of the reason is because players get to see that Zoltan piece of you, right? Because Zoltan, he's hilarious. I love Zoltan. And playing with him as Teppy, oh my gosh. In my mind, it's become almost like a battle of wills.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, at least, right? No, I have lots of ideas of where that character dynamic could go, but...
Me too. And it's really interesting. It might be because we as a group were more used to playing with each other when we did the one-shots. I'm not sure what it is, but for me personally, when I listen to the one-shots compared to the early episodes of the main story, the group dynamic of the one-shot characters is stronger from the get-go than the main group. I'm not sure. I can't place why that is. But that group dynamic is just so fun between Karg and Gore and Zoltan and Teppy. And Teppy, I feel like, was a phenomenal fit for the group dynamic. Like, she's just so fun, especially in the Waves of Madness one-shot where wisdom saves were king. Teppy, the 17-year-old girl, has the highest wisdom score in the entire group. Zoltan has the lowest. And seeing those two butt heads, especially where Zoltan is a very proud, very... not necessarily egotistical, but he comes from basically a celebrity lifestyle and is thrust into a position where no one knows him. People are very crass with him. Like it's so fun to see that dynamic grow.
It's a lot of fun. I think about that fight a lot and how the only reason we won is because I kept bashing them with like a ball of fire. That was such a stressful fight. I was like, people are dropping like flies.
Good.
Oh.
It was meant to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that we've talked this point to death. We're going to beat this horse, though. Zoltan, he flew through his spells. He was wrecking face, and it came back to bite him. So I think there's a learning experience for him there.
Which I think that is super fitting for Zoltan, because he comes from all of his martial combat experience is in a fight arena. Like, it is in a controlled, basically MMA setting where it's very clear no one's gonna die from this. The whole idea is to get in there, burn through your flashy stuff first to get audience favor and finish the fight as quickly as possible. He is not used to a life and death situation, and so the fact that he burned all of his spells so quickly was very fitting. And honestly helped me balance the rest of the fight. Because if he had been more reserved with his spells at the beginning, I don't think you guys would have struggled with that fight as much as you did. And Gore having to step out because Riley, you lost connection. That also saved my thing, because if you had been there dealing damage too, I think that fight would have been over a lot quicker. And so I'm still learning how to balance combat. So I'm very glad that that episode turned out the way it did.
Yeah, if you want a very unbalanced combat, I think it's episode 15 in terms of recording. Just wait for that.
Oh yeah, I was not prepared for that.
No, I don't think any of
I
us
don't think any of us were. I'm not going to lie, I
expecting-
wasn't.
You pulled a major sneaky on me there. What were
But
you
going
saying,
into
Jens?
the characters from the main group and some listener feedback in terms of that, like backstory pieces, we've talked a little bit about people's backstories and why they chose their characters, but in terms of backstory that the audience has had, we haven't had a whole lot from a couple of our characters.
Yeah,
So
I posed the question to my community and my following on Instagram, which, by the way, is the best way to keep in contact with the show. I asked the question, like, which character is your favorite, and which character's backstory are you most excited about? And Suri is the fan favorite. A lot of people said they really like Suri as a character. But on the flip side, Bartholomew is the backstory people are most excited about, which, pleased to tell you guys, you're going to get more of that soon. From both Bart and Suri. Me personally, this is probably just because I know Bart's backstory, so I'm not as interested in it. I am super excited to get more of Bafuur's backstory, because since I knew Bafuur in the test session, I had a little glimpse at what was going on for him, but I know things have changed a lot since we started the Magic the Gathering story, so I'm personally super excited to learn more about Bafuur's backstory.
I don't know exactly when that will be, however.
Yeah,
we're trying. We are doing our darndest.
right
It
now,
really is
little
a
Suri
Bart and
on
Suri
Innistrad.
show.
yeah, since we're on Innistrad, Suri's backstory is definitely taking the forefront, which is fine. It's also one that I'm very interested in learning more about, especially after recent events in our recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those of you who are excited about Bartholomew's backstory, you're going to get some of that here pretty soon. And the backstory thing, let's talk on that for just a minute. That's one thing that we've all agreed we want to start focusing on more moving forward. We've talked about it behind the scenes. We all want to learn more about these characters, and we want the story to take a very character-driven approach. And with the episodes moving forward, after you listen to this, the next episodes you're going to be hearing, you're going to start to see that shift in storytelling, where we're going to start pulling more character backstory in, and it gets really fun. I have been really enjoying the amount of backstory tie-in for all the characters that has been showing up recently.
Yeah, episode 17 I think is a really big highlight. Episodes 16 and 17 are really big highlights in terms of, like, we're just firing on all cylinders there. So the best is yet to come.
One thing that has been pointed out to me that could be helpful is at the beginning of the episodes doing a quick character and player reintroduction, which I will agree with. I've listened to so many D&D podcasts recently, which is awesome. But that's one thing I've picked up on as I've listened to a bunch of them, is having that moment at the beginning where you get a glimpse at the players and you get a reminder of who their characters are, can be really helpful for distinguishing characters during the episode. That's one thing that I've noticed is an issue with a lot of podcasts that I've heard over my lifetime, is there's some podcasts where the people all just sort of sound the same, and it's hard to keep things straight. So I think having that moment at the beginning where we reiterate, I am so-and-so, this is the character I'm playing today, I think I agree with is something that could be helpful moving forward.
So I will try and do that, because we've talked about this as well. I go from 0 into session in a moment's notice.
Yep. I've learned that
So
I need to hit the record button the minute the video call starts, because I don't know when the episode is going to start.
Yeah. What I can do is I can just get a Sharpie and write down on a piece of paper and hold it up for Jens and say, "Wait, let us introduce ourselves."
Yes,
Problem
please help
solved.
me, because I go into it, and I will do my part. We'll try and do my part to have you guys introduce yourselves at the beginning of every episode.
So that's something we're going to try and change moving forward, because we definitely want you, the listeners, to be on board and up to date with what's going on. Couple of positive feedback that I've received. This one surprised me. I did 2 standalone Fireside Dice explained episodes where I explained the Plane of Ravnica and the guilds that are present there, and I described and went through the color theory very briefly. That was intended to be a monthly thing where I did something every month, but life got hectic and it fell under the wayside, and those episodes didn't perform well at all. And so I just sort of ignored them, but I've been recently told that those episodes are actually really helpful for helping the audience understand the setting that we're in. Because we, for the most part, most of us know the Magic the Gathering setting fairly well. And so we use terms and we describe things that we know very well that the audience doesn't. And so those standalone episodes apparently have been very helpful. So I'm going to look at reviving that. We might see those showing up again moving forward.
Let me know if you want help with that, because I would be happy to help with that, and 2, it might be helpful for me to assist in that because I would be doing research, which helps me learn because I'm not intimately familiar with the Magic the Gathering setting. I've picked up a lot, and I know it's a thing, but it's not something I'm as familiar with as you guys are. So I think it would be helpful to have someone who has that outsider's perspective help explain it.
That's true. And that's one
Just a
less thing
thought.
on my workload, so I am all for
True.
this. So yeah, you
True.
and I can talk about that, and
Okay,
we
yeah.
can start working on that. The other very positive piece of feedback I've received is that we as players, something about the way we play the game, specifically in this setting, our enthusiasm and our excitement for both Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering apparently shines through very well, which is very good to hear. I'm very glad to hear that, because I love this game. I love Magic the Gathering as a setting, and I think we can all agree on that. Like, this is just fun.
Yeah, I mean, we're playing the game. We may be creating a podcast, but we're all having fun while we're doing it. So,
And I love how
I
the
sure hope
stories
that we're having
unfolding
fun.
too.
Like I have said it once. I'm going to say it again. I love Dungeons and Dragons, and I love the settings that we've been able to bring in.
Yeah, we all love the game. And when I first proposed this project to everyone, one of my goals was for it to just be us playing D&D first and foremost, because I love all these guys, and we all live super far away from each other. We don't have a lot of chances to interact, and so getting to just play D&D together is one of the primary purposes of doing this show. So I'm glad that
Oh.
shines through.
I was gonna say I love the story that we're creating along with it. Like, it's really good.
Yeah, it's been really fun. So the next bit of feedback is going to lead us into the next segment where we want to talk about what are our goals, where do we see the show going. I've been told that twice a month releases would be very helpful, because doing once a month, and I kind of knew this going in, I wish we could have done more often releases before, but doing one episode a month, by the time the next episode comes out, people have forgotten what happened. And so it's a lot harder for the show to be at the forefront of people's minds. They forget about it. It's easy to drop because they're so long. And so moving forward, I want to strive for twice a month releases. Starting in 2023, we're going to see where we're going. It depends on how far ahead I can get on editing. But I'm hoping that we can start shooting for that twice a month release.
that would be
Yeah,
really
that's
good.
I think the big change going forward that we want to have, and that's been something that's internal as well for us as a group. We've been wanting to have that be a consistent thing. I think that the summer here of 22 really kind of showed us it was a little bit of a weak spot for us. We didn't have nearly as much recording time. We didn't have as consistent of a schedule.
Yeah, because I was moving and switching jobs, which was really stressful. So there was a lot of stuff I had to do to prepare for that. And Josh, you were doing school, and you've got your little family that you were figuring things out with. Like, we were all just very busy this summer, and so it just didn't work out. I think it was like a 4-month period that we didn't play.
Yeah.
Which luckily we had a backlog of episodes, so there was no lack in episodes to release. But yeah, if we're going to be able to do twice a month releases, we're gonna have to make sure we maintain a large buffer of pre-recorded episodes to make up for those moments where we just don't have the opportunity to
Right.
record.
Yeah.
Speaking of buffers, how is our buffer now? Where are we at?
So at the time of this recording, this month I'm releasing episode 10. The last episode we recorded was 17. So by the time 2023 rolls around, we will have released episodes 10 and 11. 12 will be the next release. So we'll have about 5 to 8 episodes of a buffer, depending on how much recording we can do between now and then. So I think it'll be feasible. We'll just have to make sure we are including. I think every month we need to have our regular 3-hour session where we get 2 episodes worth, and try as often as possible to get an extra 1 episode half session every month as well. And if we can do that, I think we'll be fine as far as the buffer goes, and we can play that by ear.
Yeah.
I will say, you're hearing this first, I will guarantee we will maintain the last Friday of every month. There will be a new episode. We will maintain that. I'm going to try to do twice a month, but depending on how things shake out, there may be months that we go back to once a month, but hopefully that'll be few and far between. I will always guarantee that last Friday, though.
For as long as as long as the podcast has been recorded for.
Yep. As long as we can, which that was one of my goals for this first year, and we succeeded. We uploaded a new episode on the last Friday of every single month of 2022.
Woohoo!
That's
So,
awesome.
Very pleased with that.
You should be. It's a big accomplishment.
Yeah,
I say as if I'm not part of it.
Is there anything else that you guys would like to see us change moving forward, as far as the story or the production quality? What are some of your things that you want to see changing moving forward?
There's a couple of pieces that you and I have talked about personally outside of everything that's been recorded, and that is the tone of the campaign. There have been a couple of points that we have gotten pretty dark, and I think that the Suri sideshow was one of those big pieces. And the most recent episode, we did bring some of those elements. They were not at the forefront.
I think the last episode we recorded, that was a good balance, I feel like, of Suri's patron and that backstory still being a very major role, but not being quite so visceral and front-facing camera. I think that was a very good balance.
Yeah. And so trying to maintain that balance going forward is one of those pieces that, for me personally, I want to have going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this is purely technical, and this might be something you don't have the time for. But Foley work. Not a ton, but just
I'm not familiar with that term.
so like, you know, I like
Sound
Jen's mentioned
effects
in the
going
old,
in, the little
Yeah.
audio clips. And
just
I
like
think
little
we had that.
little ones.
I think we had that in the Waves of Madness one shot.
Yes, both
That's-
one-shot episodes. I played with that to see. I used those as a test to see how much extra work that would add to the process.
Right.
And it luckily for the Waves of Madness one-shots, especially since those were 2 episodes in 1 month, that both had a lot more sound effects, a lot more music involved. I was able to do it. I don't know if I will do the level of sound effects I
Right.
did with Waves of Madness, but that is something that I would like to start integrating more of. Yeah, I think that's something we can work on. We can work on adding.
Yeah. I just asked because listening to those episodes, I think they were good. They were great to start with, but adding those extra effects, that extra sound, really helped take it up just another notch, right?
Yeah,
I thought
I can agree with that.
they were awesome.
I agree.
Luckily, so all the music that we use for the show comes from a producer named Alexander Nakarada. He produces a bunch of royalty-free music that is designed for people to use in this kind of medium. He has a lot of really great stuff, but I've found there have been times that I've been like, I want to add music to this moment, but I haven't found anything from him that will sometimes fit the mood that I'm going for. So moving forward, I'm going to start expanding, trying to find other avenues of music to supplement, because he has a lot of great stuff, and he's the one that did the intro music that we use, which is phenomenal. I love that song, and that's another
you so
feedback
much, Alex.
actually that I've been given is people love that intro song. So kudos to Alexander Nakarada for that. But yeah, music and sound effects is something I want to delve into more as well. For me personally, on the post-production front, one of my goals is to figure out what all the dials and switches in the audio editing part of my software means. Because right now I'm just turning things and flipping things and hoping that it makes a difference. And it's working, but I want to get deeper into that. Because especially with like the earlier audio stuff, I feel like there are ways I could have improved that I just didn't know. So like being able to remove gain scratches and weird audio blips, background like background noise, all that kind of stuff, I want to work on figuring out how to eliminate those better. So yeah, audio is definitely the forefront of goals for me moving forward. Another thing I want to figure out how to do is figure out how we can remotely record everyone's audio tracks separately, because one of the issues that I run into that is impossible for me to fix is when we all talk over each other. And because of the latency in our video call, sometimes that happens and we don't even realize it. And there have been moments where we talked over someone who is giving some very important story beats that don't get repeated. And so I have to make the decision in those moments, do I leave us talking over each other and hope that the audience can hear this important thing that was just said, or do I cut it out entirely? And so if we can get up to a point where I can have everyone's audio tracks separate, so like if Jens is giving some dialogue or Suri and Bafuur are having a conversation, I can eliminate everyone else for the duration of their conversation. And that's one of the things I want to do. It's hard where we're recording remotely because there's not like a little magic box that we can all plug our mics into that does it for me. And so I've been doing some research on programs that will let me do that, but I still haven't found one that works for us yet. So that's one of the things I want to change as well.
That's a good idea. Like having 5 separate audio channels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As soon as you find that answer, just let us know. I'm certain that we will implement as soon as we can.
Yeah, and we could talk about that stuff off recording, because there's some options that have been presented to me that have their pros and cons, but we can get into that. That's technical mumbo jumbo that the listeners don't need to hear. So we've talked about we want to work on the tone of the show moving forward. That's a big one, especially since when I initially started this show, my goal was to create a family-friendly podcast that like little kids could listen to. That's not been the way it is, mostly because Innistrad as a setting is not a family-friendly setting. While I still want to maintain, like, we don't swear in this show, which was a very big thing for me, I want to get closer to allowing, like, 10 to 13-year-olds. I would be comfortable letting my daughter at that age listen to it. So that's one thing that we're going to strive for. We're going to strive for improving audio quality and adding more sound effects and music to bolster the storytelling that we're doing, and more common releases. Those are the 3 big ones that we're going to try and improve moving forward with this campaign. The next thing that I've been asked about and things I've been wondering about is what are our plans after the Planeswalker campaign? Once we've completed this story, what are we thinking we want to do moving forward with season 2, so to speak?
I'm willing to do just about anything. I've got a couple of different homebrew worlds that would be super fun, I think. Going into like the Sword Coast or one of those pre-written settings might be fun. But ultimately, for me, I want to present a story that you all want to play. So to me, it really comes down to what do you all want?
My one request is somewhere I can play a halfling, because I had a great idea for a halfling character for the one shots. I will say it was for the one shots, and I was talking to Jens and Skylar. I was like, wait a minute. I was doing my research. I was like, are there halflings in Magic the Gathering? And there are not.
Nope.
So, I have an idea, and I want to implement it. And I'm not in any other campaigns at the moment that I can implement it. I'm patient. I can wait. But that is my one request.
I would say absolutely save that character, because the first idea that I had, the homebrew world that I have, is very much like the classic high fantasy sort of setting. So that I think would be a perfect for this halfling character.
I would enjoy
Good.
a high fantasy as well. I've got a couple character ideas for
Mm-hmm.
And
next
the
season.
storyline that I originally started world building for was kind of like a piratey high seas sort of setting. I feel like that would be super fun.
That could be fun.
Yes.
What are your thoughts, Riley?
All of those sound amazing. Like, I love pirates, and then also high fantasy. Like, that's just like Lord of the Rings type of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm into all of that. And like the others said, like just getting to create another character is always fun.
Mm-hmm. I'll agree with all of that because I've been craving a traditional high fantasy D&D setting, and I've got an idea for a character that I've gotten super stoked about that just doesn't fit in Magic the Gathering, not in the way I would like it to. So I think we've all reached a consensus after the Planeswalker campaign of Season 1. We're gonna move on to a whole new homebrew setting from Gens that we're all gonna play traditional D&D characters.
High fantasy, maybe high seas.
So this means get cooking, get brewing.
Oh, stuff has been brewing. Like it's been on the slow and low. Like we're just letting all those
Oh.
flavors get to mingle together.
We're simmering
Good
now. I
chili.
see. Okay. I've never heard a campaign described as chili, but you know what? I think it works.
We're letting all those flavors get to know one another.
Mm-hmm.
Patience will be rewarded.
Okay. It's good to hear.
Talking about campaign 2, that's far off. That is very
Yeah.
far off. In terms
That's-
of short goal,
That's one thing I've been wondering, before we move on to the short-term goals, how close would you say we are to your perceived end of this campaign?
that's a wonderful question. I feel like we could end it after they get the Otherworld Atlas if we so desired.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know though, because the Curse of Strahd storyline, that's what I've adapted for this campaign, and that only goes up through like level 10, and we could probably go up to like level 12 or 13 with it if we do the level ups in a way that facilitates that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you guys want to continue on with the storyline from that point, we can absolutely do that. Like in my world building document for this campaign, I have got like a list of almost like a dozen different artifacts that we could continue going after. Vincenzo Sirac, I don't think is done with you guys at this point. I think that he wants to hold on to you for as long as he can.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
so seeing that dynamic of where you guys go with him could be a really fun thing to continue off of after you get the Otherworld Atlas.
I think for me, I would like to see some of the major story beats from the different characters' backstories be fulfilled. And I think at that point, I think that would be a satisfying end to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have to heal everybody's tragic backstory.
Or just kill them
Sure.
off, either way.
Yeah.
Stop it, Skylar. Stop saying that you want to die. Bart
But-
gets to live.
I desperately want to get more Bafuur backstory. I want to see, especially the developments between Bartholomew and Suri. I want to see Suri's story played through. I think I want to see the character arcs wrapped up nicely as much as we can before we
Yeah.
move on.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
The story will let us know when we're finished.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's a good way of
So we
putting
are
it.
all saved the story.
Or the hit points.
Or the hit points, yeah. So before we move on to some listener questions, like Jens was mentioning, let's talk about some short-term goals for year 2. Based on how many listens and plays that we've had on podcast platforms, I want to set a number today, official number that we want to shoot for how many views that we've had, how many listens the show has had by the end of 2023.
At
Okay, so
least
you
600.
Yeah, if we double, that is fantastic. However, I want to go further than that. I want to push this goal from 600. So,
Yeah.
we have had 300 in 3 months. I want to exceed 1,200 by the end of 1 year.
So it's been 354 views in the first year of the podcast life. Over 50% of that has been in the last 3 months. So I think based on that growth and that picking up momentum we've been getting, I've been thinking 1,000 is a very achievable goal for this year.
I was also thinking 1,000 to like 1,000 to 1,500 is what I wrote down.
Yeah. I think if we can hit 1,000, I have an idea for a fun giveaway we could do to celebrate 1,000. So I think 1,000 is our baseline goal that I would like to shoot for specifically podcast platform listens. YouTube is a different beast. It's easier for the show to show up in people's searches on YouTube, but the view percentage is terrible. People aren't actually listening to it on YouTube, so I don't really give YouTube's statistics a whole lot of credit. The podcast platform ones are the ones I'm really wanting to lean into. And I think 1,000 is a really good goal for 2023.
Yeah.
I agree.
As we get closer to that goal and as we get through this year, I've been putting thought into doing a Patreon or a Ko-fi account for the show, because there have been some things that I've wanted to do with the show and that we've talked about with the show that are currently paywalled. If it weren't for the generosity of RC's Big Air, our audio quality would still not be, it would still be subpar. And so I want to wait until I have good perks to really truly reward people for supporting us financially. But that is on the burner. That is on my goal for this year as well. As I want to look into developing something like that. I'm leaning towards Ko-fi because Ko-fi, as opposed to Patreon, allows for single-time donations, which would be huge. But just so you listeners are aware, that is something that is in the works, and I am hoping that will become a thing.
So, Skylar, you and I, we're both sitting at the stove. We've got Campaign 2 on the very much back burner, simmering. We've got the coffee in the little teapot on the front burner.
We're brewing so much.
Yeah, we're working on it. We love this project. It's a project of love for us, and we want to provide you all, the audience, with the best quality possible. And it takes time. So your patience, as I said previously, will be rewarded.
And honestly, our show has grown more than I ever actually legitimately thought it would. I genuinely thought we were going to start this project, we were going to get a year into it, no one would be listening, and I was fully prepared to just drop it as a project and just play D&D together. But because we have been picking up momentum and I've been interacting with members of the D&D podcast community, it's been so phenomenally satisfying. This whole project, every part of it. It's been frustrating at times when I'm editing and I'm like, oh, why is it doing this? But for the most part, it has been one of the most satisfying hobbies I have ever partaken in my life. And so I want this to last as long as possible. And you listeners listening and sharing the show is a big part of why that's possible for us. So thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. We're gonna end off Emberside chat with some listener questions that people have sent in. Most of these, about over half of them, have come from other D&D podcasts that I interact with. So huge thank you to all of them. They have been super helpful, super accepting of me as I've been trying to share our little show with all of them. We're gonna start with a question from 20 Sides Podcast. What is the moment of the show that you first tell people about when you're talking about it? This is actually a hard question because outside of Instagram, I don't talk to people about this show very often. I don't really talk to people very often. So
I tell people at my work about it, and people at family, like people in my family that I speak to. Trying to think.
Less than social at the best of times, and for me to share, I love this show. I don't share many details about my life with people. So sharing with people, hey, I'm running a show. I'm part of a show. Please go listen to me. That is so out of my wheelhouse. And so for me, that hasn't come up a whole lot. In fact, actually, so last week, we are recording this in November of 22. Only last week, it has been over a year of us doing this thing. Only last week did I go into the local game store and say, hey, I've got stickers for this show that I'm a part of. I would love to share it with you guys.
yeah.
It has taken a year of building up the courage to do that.
I
It's
honestly,
okay. It's so hard. I mean, speaking for myself, I'm an introvert. I'm assuming the rest of you are introverts as well. Something like this, it almost feels like a diary or a journal, and sharing it, something so like intimate, it's so scary. So I get it.
Yeah.
But if I was going to tell someone about the show, I think I would highlight, at least for myself, if I was saying, I started in this episode, and this is such a good moment, you should go listen to it. This episode that Leven is introduced, where she's talking with Bafuur.
That's such a fun moment.
It's so good.
Usually my elevator pitch when someone finds out I have a show and I'm telling about them is I just tell them it's a live play 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons podcast set in the multiverse of Magic the Gathering. That is verbatim, word for word, what I tell people about the show. Because that's really, I feel like, the unique thing right now that we bring to this sphere is the setting. The setting is what sets us apart. I will say I will frequently tell my family about whatever the most recent session we recorded was. I will talk my wife's ear about it. The minute I go upstairs after we record, I'm like, oh, you will not believe what just happened. So, like, it's always
Exactly
whatever
what
we
I
most
do.
recently did is usually the first thing I
Jen's
tell my
just
family
tried
about.
to kill us.
I'm not gonna lie, I did go up after that for that one before the cliffhanger. I went up and I told my wife, I was like, I think Jen's is gonna kill us. I'm pretty sure next episode's a TPK. Like, I don't know what we're gonna do.
No, that was me. I was talking to my parents about it because that's the first thing my mom always asks was, "Did you die this episode?" And so far, fortunately, I've been able to say no. But after that one episode, I was like, "Not yet, but maybe." Who knows?
That
My wife
cliffhanger at the
knows
end
all
of-
the details.
Yeah, so does mine.
the cliffhanger at the end of episode 16, I think, was a big piece for us.
Mm-hmm.
We literally did not know if our characters were going to survive. So that is the biggest spoiler. Surprise, they survive. You don't get to know anything else
One has died
Yet.
yet.
Zoltan is the person who got the closest. Zoltan has been the only character in our show who has dropped.
Oh,
I
good
will
times.
wear that badge with pride.
All right, so moving on to the next question. This one comes from Eldritch Buds. Who is your all-time favorite NPC? I think we're all going to have to go through and answer this one on our own. Pretty sure I could think of one NPC that most of us really enjoy, but I'm curious what everyone has to say. So let's start with you, Riley. I'm curious, who's your favorite NPC?
This is in our campaign, right?
In our campaign.
Okay. From this campaign, my favorite NPC, and Suri's, I'm sure, is Annabelle, of course. It's just like the cutest witch ever. Tries to like, you can see there's like so much spark and fight in her. Like, she's just silly.
I love to play
Very
as Annabelle.
rambunctious.
She is so great. I will let the rest of you go though, because I'm gonna give my little pieces about all of your NPC favorites, and then I'm gonna say mine. So,
Josh or Emma? Because I've been doing a lot of talking.
It's so hard. Leven and I haven't really interacted with that many. So I don't have a huge pool recently. I really, really, really like Nutty, me personally.
That's what I was gonna say. Dang it.
I mean, we
Well,
can
that
share
be
an
your
answer.
in-character
Yeah, you guys can
one.
have the same answer.
Yeah, I don't have an in-character answer yet. I can also say as a player, this is not necessarily directly tied to the campaign, but from the one-shots, is Feldius, the uncle?
Yep.
He's intriguing. As an NPC, I think he's intriguing. I'm curious to know more about him. Josh, anyone besides Nutty?
I mean, that's really. I mean, Bafuur has gotten to know the party and has grown close to the party as far as like loyalty goes, but Bafuur doesn't really talk a ton, and Nutty just seems to get it. So he's currently Bafuur's best friend.
Oh,
And for those of you who are confused, Nettie is an NPC that shows up in episode 16.
just wait.
Yeah, he's second or third on my list for sure.
If we ever made
Bafuur-
an enamel, if we ever made an enamel pin, I would want an enamel pin of Nutty.
Nutty
Yes.
sitting in Bafuur's beard.
Nutty and Bacon.
Nutty and
Those
Bacon.
two are our
Mhm.
neck pins.
I was just gonna say, I feel like if Bafuur is ever able to be reunited with any members of his family, that those will probably be his favorite NPCs.
There's some recent information, like as of the last 7 days, that I've gotten from Josh about Bafuur that I'm just like, okay, I've got to bring this in.
Awesome.
It is so good. Like, it will happen in the story, and we will have it happen organically.
That's the idea.
I think for me, I've got two criteria. Since I've also DM'd, I've got a favorite NPC that Jen's played, and I've got a favorite NPC that I played. For the one that Jen's played, I love, is it Morbach, the troll?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I something about the way you played him and that like slow, deep voice. Like, he's just so fun. I love listening to that part of that episode. As far as NPCs I've played, I love the little boy that interacts with Zoltan at the beginning of the Bonded in Battle one shot. He was so fun to play. It was such a wholesome interaction, and I was
such
here
a
for
cute
it.
moment.
I loved it, and
seriously,
it was not planned.
No.
The whole reason that boy spoke up, it was meant to be a showing the audience that Zoltan is integrated into this place and give a little backstory of Zoltan, like he is a known figure. I was not prepared for you to turn around and interact with the boy. And so that whole interaction was completely improv, and it is phenomenal. I love that little boy with my heart and soul.
bringing that character in, and yeah, I could tell from the way that you were presenting and the way that your voice went that this was not meant to be a thing. And I was like, no, this is going to be a character moment for Zoltan, and it's going to be a defining moment of how he presents himself and what he does with society.
Mm-hmm. And that moment really does show us who Zoltan himself is, which is that glimpse is actually very important given what you and I have talked about, given his backstory and the life that he has lived. So I love that little boy.
So Nutty is an absolute treat and really takes me into a very different place than all of the other characters. I'm so glad, Skylar, that you brought in one of those NPCs that we talked about prior to running the game, because I love those characters, and we haven't met hardly any of them. But Orpheus de Roe, being able to bring him in
Don't like
was
him.
so fun because I got to twist you in so many different ways. And I think that the characters that I love are the ones that bring out pieces of each of the PCs. And so for me, my favorite character in terms of being the DM and being able to have an NPC that I get to play basically has got to be Streffen Mauer.
Knew it.
Yeah.
Yep.
The way that I get to push your guys' buttons is so much fun to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say I hate Streffen Mauer, but I love the way you play him.
I
He's
love
so
to
good.
hate.
He's a
I
great
love
villain.
to hate him.
He really is. Especially the way you play him.
And we've talked about this as well in other Emberside chats. I get to play him in a way that I feel really highlights him as a character and brings out some different pieces that I've never been able to do before with this campaign.
All right. Next question comes from Will, my brother-in-law. What inspired us to make a D&D podcast? And we've kind of touched on this a little bit. The biggest reason I wanted to do this, and the reason I felt like it was feasible for us to do it in such an oversaturated market, is there's a lot of D&D podcasts out there. But the problem is 99% of them are extremely vulgar, which I'm okay with listening to that, but my wife hates it. So I can't listen to a lot of podcasts around my family. And this is something that I want to be able to share with my family. And I know there's other people out there like me. And so I wanted a podcast that specifically was not vulgar. I didn't want any swear words. And I wanted it to be something that parents could listen to with their children. And like we've talked about, that age range of listeners has been bumped up a little higher than I initially intended for it to be. But I still think that we're close to hitting that mark. But that's why I wanted to do a D&D podcast. And that's why I approached all of you. I'm curious, why did all of you agree to do the podcast with me?
I think I just wanted to play D&D. I mean, I at that point when you asked me, the only other D&D that I was involved with was I was kind of DMing a single player campaign with me and a Reno.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of fell by the wayside. And so it was right around that time when you asked me to play. I was like, oh, perfect. Like, this other game's just kind of falling through the cracks. Like, let's go ahead and do this, and that'd be great. I think since starting to play, the motivations of wanting to continue to play has grown from just wanting to play D&D to wanting to play D&D with my new friends and wanting to, like you said, further that goal of producing a family-friendly podcast, something that we can go to anybody that we know or work with or are related to and be proud of it.
I said you caught me at a really good time because it was I'd always like had an interest in D&D after we'd played it at college because I was like, yeah, this could be really cool, but I never really got like a chance to play it like consistently until like some friends I had over in some part of Utah, like at the middle of 2020, like they bought Lost Mine of Phandelver, but no one knew how to play it. And so I was like, I can DM it. And so I just learned like all of the rules and like what every class can do and like how spellcasting works and all that good stuff. And that campaign only lasted till like October, and then it kind of just stopped because, you know, I Lost Mine of Phandelver isn't that interesting. It definitely had nothing to do with my first time DMing, you know, me being inexperienced.
Not at all.
But
No.
I really liked D&D after that. I made a bunch of characters like that I would love to play, and then you asked me if I wanted to play with a bunch of people I didn't know. I was like, yeah, they all have experience. Like, this sounds perfect. Because I was already like thinking about playing with random people online on like whatever those sites are, like Roll20 and
Cool.
but
Yeah.
it's much better to play with y'all.
With semi-connected randos.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, and yeah, I honestly, I was not anticipating the invite from Skylar initially. Like, I heard that he wanted to do a D&D podcast. Like, I feel like we had talked about that at some point previous to you contacting me, and I was like, dang, that sounds like that'll be so cool. I can't wait for you to start releasing episodes. And then you said, hey, you want in? I got all excited about you producing something, and then I never thought that I was going to be a part of it. And it has been an absolute treat. Like, I'm one of those yahoos who is completely familiar with the game, and so being able to bring in all of that experience, I hope that's been something that has been a boon to you, to this, I would say, table, this virtual space, this airspace, whatever the term is.
Yeah, your
I hope
experience
that's been a boon for you all.
it's been huge. Like, I just think about when you go back and listen to the one-shots, the sheer number of times I'm like, that's a good question. Hey, Jens.
Yeah, it happens. What was okay? Remind me of exactly the question again.
So the question
I
was,
forget.
why did you agree to be a part of the show?
Got you. Okay. So I mean, I agreed because at the time, you had been doing the show for a little bit by then, and we were all visiting at our grandmother's house, and you were talking about the show, and I just mentioned, oh man, it's been so long since I've played. I want to get playing again because I had downtime at the time. I mean, I still have downtime, just less of it. I had just mentioned, I was like, oh man, I want to get into playing again. And you had brought up, you were like, we're actually kind of thinking about bringing in another player. And then there was the test session, of course, and I agreed. And since then, like Josh, my motivations, my motives have kind of changed. At the core, I still want to play D&D. I have so much fun with it. But also, doing this, I have found that it's something I really enjoy, and it's something that I think I want to do, like, long term. I want to have my own podcasts. I want to be making my own content. Because right now, currently, I am doing that, but I'm doing it in a corporate capacity. I work for a largish insurance brokerage in the marketing department, and so I'm producing content. I'm producing articles, blog posts, flyers, stuff like that, but it's about insurance, right? And I can do it, but it's not something I want to do long term. And so this has really opened my eyes, and so now I see it as like a learning experience and a chance for me to stretch my wings. So I want to say thank you for allowing me the chance to do so.
Well, good. I'm glad. And around the time you and I were having that conversation and I extended that invite to you, we had been told by, I know Josh's wife had brought this up, and I'd heard it from someone else, that the one thing that felt like our show was missing was a girl. Like a girl's voice. Like it's something to break up the monotony of the rest of our voices. And so we were actively looking specifically for a girl to join the group to add that extra insight and that point of view that the rest of us don't have. And so then you made that comment and I was like, hey,
Yeah.
I got an offer for you. And it's worked
Yeah.
out great.
Mm-hmm. It has.
That's one thing that's been fun for me. As the one person who knew everyone, it's been fun to watch this group come together and grow into such a strong friendship, I feel like.
Yeah, you're kind of the Nick Fury of this whole Avengers
true.
Assemble initiative.
That's true. I am.
Got to
Nick
get you an
Fury.
eye patch.
All right, moving on to the next question. Jens, this one is specifically for you. It comes from Torpedo Fish. Where do you get your ideas for the campaign, and what tips do you have for improv?
Oh, yikes. For me, I feel like I less have ideas for the campaign as a whole. Like I said previously, I want to present a story that people want to listen to. And as characters, me as a human, I am lazy. I want to take the path of least resistance and just go start, finish, done, cut, dry, cut the check. We're done. But that's not an interesting story. So I am a very avid reader, story listener, storyteller. And I love listening to... I love going onto like TV tropes and breaking down what are all the different idiosyncrasies, what are things that you could exploit and figure out, what are these common motifs that happen across stories. And so I'm going to absolutely steal a analogy that I heard on a different thing, the Dungeon Masters of Exandria round table from Critical Role. I'm going to absolutely steal an analogy from that. This story is like trying to get water down a hill from point A to point B. I'm trying to make things as interesting in terms of like a path, making it more of a water slide trying to go down. So I'm giving different like loop-de-loops and curves and twists that I feel would be fun, that diverts these characters from their natural story arc and puts them into different and interesting situations. Is also an engaging and listenable experience. In terms of improv, though, for me, like we've said before, a lot of the pauses that I take are cut out just due to the natural cadence of how I dungeon master. And so for me, it's less of improv and more of just who is this character? And once again, taking that analogy, what is that natural thing that they would want? And how do I use that to create an interesting experience for the character interacting with this NPC, for this interesting situation to put them into, and just taking what are the natural consequences of the characters involved and the situation they're being put in.
We could all go into that topic a lot more, I feel like, but we're running short on time, so we're going to move on to the last question. This comes from Death by 1,000 Crits, a phenomenal podcast. Them, Eldritch Buds, and 20 Sides. I highly recommend all of them. They're really fun. In what ways have you all grown with your D&D skills during this process of producing the show?
Refer to my previous answer.
When they sent me this question, I had to stop and be like, I had never thought of it that way. Like, how has specifically my skills as a D&D player changed? So it's a very hard question, I feel like. It's a great question. I love that question.
I feel like mine is something that I've talked about previously when we've kind of had our post-recording chats. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed that I've been trying to implement, and I still want to continue to do more of and do a better job of it, is when I am describing what my character is doing or saying or whatever action they're taking, trying to describe that, how it looks, how it feels, sounds, whatever. So it's not all just description coming from Jens. It's actually like flavor that's coming from me playing the character and trying to give and do my part in making the character actually seem like they have depth.
And I've seen that shift since the start of the show to now, the way you play Bafuur. I can see that transition. I think it all started really with the way you started describing how your axe works. once we all kind of agreed that the telescoping lens, or like the telescoping handle, was a big feature of your axe, I love every time you describe like clicking the handle and having it extend or just contract. Like, your axe has been really fun, and especially these previous episodes that we've recorded, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, I can
Bafuur.
literally hear it.
So Riley, what have you learned?
I think I've gotten a lot better at like knowing character motivation and like just role playing in general. Because Suri's like one of the harder PCs I've had to roleplay, so playing her has just given like a lot of experience, and I still want to figure out how to articulate better, and like I need to work on that. But I've never gotten to interact with a patron before, and Jen's Withen Guard is absolutely like one of the best, like probably one of the best to start with, I would think.
I love warlocks. I have beat this horse to death. I'm gonna beat it again. Go up to this skeleton, kick it a couple times. I love warlocks, and I love the interactions that they have with their patron, because it's one of those. One of the things for me is D&D characters are so often two-dimensional. I have a stat sheet. I want to go. I want to have a hit point battle. I just want to sync hit points with other people, and I'm there for that. And so having three-dimensional characters, the Warlock is one of the easiest to make a three-dimensional character, because it's how do they interact with their patron. A lot of the other classes, you've really got to put some time and effort in to figure out, how is my bard? How do I find magic with my bard? How does my cleric find their magic? How does my fighter, how did they learn? What did they do? I mean, you can say I was town guard, but what really does that mean? And so with Suri and with warlocks in general, for me, I really try and implement those backstory pieces for them, and I've been really trying to get better at bringing in the backstory pieces of all of our other classes that we have, and bringing moments for them to shine as well.
Yeah.
Riley, you've done a great job playing Suri. Like, there's a reason she's the fan favorite of the group.
Sure.
I'm so glad, because I always get like post-session anxiety of like, oh man, I hope I talked over them too much.
If anything, we talk over you too often, man.
Yeah,
Yep.
don't even worry.
One other thing I have written down is we also know about the long jump mechanic, which I think we can all agree is very important when you're trying to cross a
Yes.
river of lava.
The long jump mechanic and how much damage lava does were both new to me when that session happened. I was planning on doing a d6 of damage if you touched the lava, and then you popped in and was like, oh, it's 10d10. I was like, oh, shoot.
Now, lava's no joke.
Good times. Good times. I think for me, what I've learned is that it's okay to be decisive in what you want to do, but also have patience with yourself as you're going. I've talked about this with the others, but Leven is the furthest character from who I am that I've ever played. So there have been moments where I actually have to stop and get into her headspace and think, this is how I would react, but that's not how Leven would react. What is she going to do in this moment? And then from there, I'll have a couple of options, and then instead of trying to like panic and decide which one is the best, I'm decisive and I make that decision, because I find that those are the moments where you have the best result, either story beat wise or just like sheer on a sheer technical scale, right? But you have to be decisive. If you let yourself get caught in the, oh, what if that's wrong though, it's crippling, right? And it's so much easier to say than it is to do, because I've been there where you're like frozen, you're like, I have so many options. But
Absolutely.
I had someone tell me once, fortune favors the brave. And I've used that a lot, and I've really seen it, I think, in this campaign so far.
Yeah, I had that problem big time with Bart early on in the story. Like, there were so many moments when we were on Ravnica where I, as a player, got bogged down because I have player knowledge that Bartholomew also sort of has, so I was able to act on that player knowledge, and it totally ground the story to a halt because of the decisions I was making. And since Bart was in the position at that time as he was like the primary protagonist of our story because he was the one making all the decisions. Those are the number one moments that make me cringe listening to the early episodes. Like, oh, why'd I do that? It would just go talk to Nassius. Don't run away. Just go talk to him. Like, yeah, I understand that for sure. And that's kind of the thing that I've learned most in this process as a D&D player is not being afraid to just make decisions. And specifically making decisions that will push the story. Like, there are times that I made a decision as Bart that his character would have made. Those decisions are true to his character, but they bogged down the story. And I'm trying now to make a priority of making the decisions that I as a player feel like will push the story forward faster.
Right. And I think that ties into the idea of improv's yes and, right? It's very much that.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to a moment that has not been released yet. I think this is episode 12 or 13. The moment after the big bad comes, completely wrecks the party. The absolutely imbalanced and meant to be imbalanced encounter. Bart has a moment where he snaps, and the playoff between that was so cool to see. And seeing Levin's yes and Bafuur's yes and we talked about it in the character moments section, where Bafuur's loyalty really shone through and Levin's level-headedness showed through. Seeing that interaction of those three, because sadly Riley couldn't make it for that session.
Unfortunately.
Seeing the interaction and having that, I feel, really galvanized the story and really started our momentum, our story-driven momentum.
Yeah, it really did. Our recent episodes have just been awesome, and I can't wait for the listeners to hear them.
Your patience will be rewarded.
Yes. That is all we have for today's Emberside chat. Thank you for not only listening to this episode, but for listening to the show in general. It means the world to us. Your listening and the momentum that you have brought our show is the reason we're still doing this at this point, really. And it has been huge for me personally, I'm sure for all of us. So thank you all so much for listening. If you want to connect with us right now, the best way to do that is to reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is at realms_of_roleplaying. You can find me there.
Not ROLL.
ROLE, yes. I share a lot of stuff. I give updates on when episodes release. I do questions about the characters. I do just general D&D stuff there. So that's a great place to interact with us. And yeah, I guess with that, until next time, come join us by the fire. The story is just getting started. Thank you all so much for joining us in this episode of Fireside Dice. This show is produced by Realms of Roleplaying. Intro and outro music was created by Alexander Nakarada of Serpent Sound Studios, and all other sound effects and music were created by Monument Studios. We'll see you all in the next episode.